Welcome to the Authentic Action Podcast. I'm Angel Lilly, and this is the Sensual by Design Practical Healing Series. And today I want to talk about creativity. I was listening to a wonderful classic speech by John Cleese from 1991 or 94. I think it was 91. And you may have heard it because it's, again, classic from the days before the interwebs. And in that speech, he's talking about creativity and how it is not directly linked to intelligence. And I want to dive more into that topic because I myself am both a creative and an intelligent person. But I do think that often intelligence can encourage us to be less creative. And I want to let me explain. I want to dive into that a little bit. Um, Creativity is something that most of us are just born with, and then we tend to unlearn as society teaches us that we should edit ourselves. And I talk a lot about the difference between the creative process and the editing process when it comes to my artwork, my writing, my music. In each of those venues, there or arenas, there is a creative part, and there's like a separate part of my brain that does the editing part, or even the learning part is probably a whole different part of the brain. And maybe it's not a certain specific compartment, but it is a sequence or a combination of, a network of activity that's going on in my brain, like in a pattern, I would say. And I've been the most aware of it when I play music, because when I'm really in the flow state and singing and playing music, it is a different part of the brain that learns music, and it is a different part of the brain that thinks about like the words or what else is going on. And I sometimes can drag myself out of that flow state, sometimes in a way that no one else could notice, and then in other times where it could cause like a train wreck in the middle of the song, basically. Thankfully, it doesn't happen that often anymore. It used to happen more often as I was still dealing with more performance anxiety. So I guess all that's to say that it's complex, and the dance between creativity and editing, or the dance between that what's often called the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, which don't actually operate independent of each other. So that research that initially defined them that way has been expanded upon, not so much disproven, but just shown to be incomplete, as I mean, isn't all research to some extent. Um, so, in the arena of creativity, what we have learned as human beings studying creativity, delighting in creativity, most of us agree that we like creativity. And then most of us also agree that at some point, the creativity can be too much, and we want some editing, or we want some boundaries. And to me, in my life, it's that dynamic dance between the two that equals how well I feel like I'm doing. And, I call it riding the waves. I I do better and worse different times. As I mentioned, I consider myself a relatively creative person, and in some ways, that translates to being childlike and being immature and being a risk taker. And some aspects of some of those things are not so popular amongst my adult peers. And um, I have had to learn to temper my creativity with some more of that logic and that reason and that practicality. I'll say with an eye roll. Um, Nonetheless, and still, as John Cleese was reminding me from 1991 or 94, whenever that was recently, um, creativity is something that we're born with and is really at the heart of all innovation, all forward momentum. And not just that, but the creative process is a joyful process. Like when you're in the moment of, in the flow state of creating, it is a very joyful, very fulfilling state to be in, regardless of what you create during that creative process. Like you could just be in that brainstorming mode where you're thinking of ideas. And I think most of us know the delight of that, right? Where you just daydreaming, or even better, perhaps you're sort of collaboratively daydreaming with a friend or a tight circle of friends and thinking about like, what if this happened and what if that happened and how about then this and then that. And I think as children, most humans do that fairly often. I remember doing it a lot as a child, and I have the pleasure working with children these days sometimes, and I see that more in children. But as adults, a lot of times adults only do that maybe when they're inebriated, for example, which perhaps I would pinky finger asterisk say is perhaps one of the reasons why so many humans love to get inebriated. Um, Maybe they don't feel free enough to play, to explore that creative, playful state of being when they're not taken out of their regular state of being. It's a very interesting thing to me, and that's why I wanted to talk about it more. And I invite your feedback, your input, your comments, your questions. I don't certainly don't have it all figured out, but I do really believe that when I tap into my creativity, that's when I feel the most alive and the most fulfilled and the most connected to life and my fellow human beings. And when I can create something and edit it and interface it in such a way that other humans can relate to it, then that's another layer. It's like layers of an onion or layers of a lotus flower where that layer builds on the layer before it, and it's such a beautiful thing when we get to share the appreciation of a creative work. And I want to bring more awareness to the fact that those are two different things, or maybe 10 different things. I don't know, but they're not exactly the same thing is the point I'm getting at. So um I'm all about appreciating the nuances of things, and I think the more we can like name those nuances or distinguish them, like uh clarify them, then the more we can begin to notice them and appreciate them in our day-to-day lives and interactions and relationships. So for me, my relationship with my own creativity gets enhanced when I separate it a little bit in my mind from the relationship I have with the editing process. Now, the editing process can also be creative. And I guess that's where, like, just like yin and yang is all about relativity, I think logic and creativity are on this relativity scale. So it's not like something is all logic, just like the left hemisphere of the brain is not all linear logic and the right half is not all gestalt feeling. And yet that when compared one to the other, one is more, the right is tends to be more related in those creative processes, and the left tends to be more active in those mathematical, linear, logical processes. All that to really say once again that I don't know shit and we don't know shit and we're still figuring it out. And the more we figure out, the more we learn that we don't know. So that's exciting. I'll set that there. And I think that's a really great argument for why we need creativity. If we needed an argument, apparently I like arguments. I don't think I'm alone in that. That's that linear part of the brain, right? That likes to make a logical, step by step argument or uh, sequence of things. And that's valid. And at the same time, the feeling, the gestalt knowing that we all have, that we could relate more to that right side. And I think am I even pointing to the right side? I don't know. I'm gonna flip around in the camera. It's gonna be all confusing. In any case, I lost my train of thought. A little bit. I know I was talking about just that general trend for the right hand, the right hemisphere, which is confusingly controlling more of the left hand. These are those to me, tends to be more related to creativity and that flow process. And again, both halves of the brain are activated in most processes that we have, measured so far. There's probably, I'm willing to bet, more that we don't know. um, Back to what we do know about creativity so far is that children are born much more creative. They are often attributed what we consider like genius type of skills or uh, characteristics. What's the word I was looking for? And then by like somewhere between 6 and 8 years old, it starts to get taught out of us. We start to learn by peer pressure, by family, by outside external messages, which of course we learn from birth to 4 and 6 as well. But then um, there's this new level that often happens where we start to suppress our creativity. We learn that that's considered silly. We learn that being childish is not taken seriously, and we stifle that creativity. We give into fears, and really we're taught a lot of fears. Babies are relatively fearless at first to their own detriment, and then just from day one, they're taught to fear things, fear things, fear things, and by the time we're 6 or 8 years old, there's usually a whole lot of things that we're afraid of. And one of those is being thought to be silly, being thought to be stupid, being shunned or laughed at, made fun of. And, here I am on YouTube, being willing to be laughed at and shunned. And it has taken me a lot of practice, actually. And part of why I do it is because it is something in me has some pushback from being bullied as a child and, you know, pushed down so much that child aspect in me, which is very strong, likes to push back on that now that I'm an adult and I can do what I want within reason. Um, and sometimes without reason, as I mentioned, part of what comes along with that extra creativity is extra challenges for me to learn to compartmentalize my creativity in ways that are safe for me and that don't jeopardize my security financially and in my relationships. And I haven't always done a perfect job of that. So, why I feel qualified to speak to that is because I have learned a lot of these lessons the hard way, as they say. And in so doing, I've learned them pretty well, I think. And I can attest to the validity of how important it is to balance both. And also how, so even though we're all born probably more creative than we end up later in life, we still all have different amounts of all the different things, right? It's very spectrumy out here in life. And and wouldn't it be dismal if it wasn't that way? It would just be stark and gray. One of the most wonderful things about life, and I believe the thing that really keeps it going, is diversity and differences, and how, we don't all have the same amount of creativity and the same amount of logic. And even as individuals, like I certainly don't have the same amount throughout my life, or even on any given day, or even probably throughout this podcast. My energy is going to rise and fall a little bit, and that spectrumy dynamic interplay of so many things is is playing out, and there's so many parts of it that are unconscious. So around me, I have quite a bit of clutter. You can see some of it, and there's even more out of your sight. And every bit of that clutter is going into, is data that's going into my sensory system, even if I'm not consciously aware of it, and creating, helping to create the totality of my experience, and then interacting with that dynamic balance of my creativity and my logic self and how I feel. My book, The Shift, speaking of feelings, I have been working on this book for 4 years, and happy to say it is out with my beta readers right now. Finally, it's about a year and a half longer than I thought it was gonna be, but nonetheless, it is there. And I still have more editing to do once I get back feedback from my beta readers. So it's not quite done yet, but it's a step closer. That book is really about owning our emotions, the nuances of being emotional, and how can we learn to feel our feelings more, live more rich and dynamic and creative lives while at the same time not becoming dysregulated, not having to shut down because we've overdone it. And in a similar vein, related to what I was talking about, not allowing that creative, childlike flow to run amok, amok, amok in such a way that it destroys our stability, our relationships, our finances, our health. All of those are things that I personally have struggled with. And I know many, many humans who have struggled with it as well, some of whom have been my clients, my friends, my family. So yeah, if you're in that basket, you're not alone. You're in good company, as they say. And I encourage you to just take a little pause and think about your own creative juice, your own editing style, and like, when do you consciously put different hats on, so to speak, or different personas on for those different aspects, or are they dancing together all the time? Can you identify that you like one more than the other? A lot of people have a preference more for like orderliness and editing, or a preference more for chaos and creativity. You can guess which side of the fence I tend to lean into. That said, it's very interesting to me that whatever aspects you find are dominant in you, you might find that that actually creates like a vacuum or an invitation for the opposing force or the opposite, just in that very beautiful way that yin and yang dance in this universe. If you're like me and you have a lot of chaotic energy, you might find that that opens the opportunity to bring more order and stability and calmness into your world. And that can become a real superpower, just as much as the chaos and the creativity can become a superpower. And in the same way, from the opposite side of the stick, so to speak, if you lean toward the orderly aspects and you're more linear in your nature, then that opens the opportunity for you to really gain a lot from inviting more of that little bit chaotic, creative, energetic, childlike energy into your life. And it can become a real superpower or a super tool for you to use when you bring that in together with your natural talents. And I guess it's worth mentioning that that's not to say that you should fight against your nature by trying to, pull yourself in the other direction. It's just to say that I invite you to dance with the opposite of your nature and recognize that even if it is the opposite of your nature, it doesn't mean that you can't gain a lot from it. And if you think of it like a dancing partner, think about like, so myself as a female, if I have a male partner who is leading, that does never, like a good dancing partner is never about one being more important than the other. It's always about that dynamic interplay, and whoever is leading is actually giving their attention to whoever is following in such a way that they can blossom and really flourish. And I think a lot of times we think about leadership in the opposite direction, like it's pulling, but leadership is inviting and holding space for others to dance into, I think, in its optimal sense. And so in that way, if you think of creativity and editing as two opposites, again, just in this mighty grand world of many nuances. I'm not saying they're the only or even completely opposites, but if we think of them through that lens, then we can see how the two can dance together. And in fact, how, like, even in real time, I'm dancing with being creative, getting into that flow, trying to feel my way into what I want to say from deep inside of me, putting all that unconscious thought together, feeling together with my conscious thought, and what everything I've been taking notes on and everything I've been exposed to, both recently and not so recently, right? And then um, at the same time, I'm doing my best to edit that, and um, it's the dance between those two that you are seeing now. And in fact, what you are seeing now will be and hearing now will be some filtered remnant of what I created, which will be filtered through your own lenses of creativity and editing and all else, right? So I just think it's fascinating to think about. And I guess the reason I wanted to ramble about it publicly is I really do think, as John Cleese was pointing out, that when we bring creativity back alive regularly in our life, hopefully like in a safe container. Maybe it's every Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock happens to be a time for me that I have a container set. I have about three of those. I have other smaller containers during the week. I have bigger containers during the season. And the point is that those are places that I set where I know that I can just be with myself in a creative state without any expectations of an output, without any expectation other than the freedom to play. And when I give myself that, it often leads to really fantastic output, and it regularly influences all the rest of my output during the week. Um, but it doesn't always. And the point is that it needs to not have to, if that makes sense. Like if you put pressure on your creative side, that creative self, you can kill it. It's like a flame that you can easily snuff out. So you have to kind of blow on it and give it air and give it space and give it fuel, much like a flame. And then that creativity can transform all that whatever's going on in you and whatever's going on outside of you into something. It can create something out of it. And sometimes it creates a story, and sometimes it creates a piece of art, and sometimes it creates a feeling. I don't mean to belittle a feeling by saying just. A feeling can be magnificent. Magnificent. I think those are feelings of what give our lives meaning and really what we're after when you really get down to it. Hmm. Yeah, I'm voting yes for more creativity, to sum it up another way. And I also would like you to check out my book, The Shift. If you're interested, it should be out on Amazon soon, hopefully in May 2025. Only a day late and a dollar short, as they say, or a year and a half late, as the case may be. And Yeah, that's not the point though. The point is that all this is an ongoing process. And if you can bring more openness, more creativity, more joy, more laughter, more lightness to your editing, to your making of things, to your processes, to your relationships, it really does up level. It lifts everything else. I think you know that's true. I certainly know that's true. I don't need a logical explanation of why that's true or scientific proof that it's true. I just know it's true. And at the same time, there actually is now scientific proof that it's true. Like we measure our chemistry and our brain waves and our, subjective ratings, and we can come up with science some scientific backing to prove that it's true for that linear side of our brain that likes that part. And then I think in so doing, it actually enhances both, right? So it's not like one is better than the other. It's more like one is incomplete without the other. And when we start to let the two dance together instead of competing with each other, it's all lifted up. Our level of understanding and our level of appreciation, our ability to collaborate and create and make sense of things and think through things and, you know, give logical explanations for things, all of it is enhanced when we let our creativity and our editing self or our linear and our gestalt or our left and our right sides of ourselves. I'm throwing all of those words into that stew because I think all of them point at what I'm getting at, and none of them are the thing that I'm getting at because the thing that I'm getting at is beyond words, really, I think, even though you might wonder if I really think that, being that I'm coming up with so many, but hey, that's one of the things I like to do. I'm a wordsmith, I'm an artist. I play with colors, I play with words, I play with feelings, I play with bodies, I play with movement, play with stones, play with wood and trees. This is a piece of wood that my biological father carved from a branch of a tree that died outside his window. He lives in Washington State still. I did not grow up knowing my father, and his name's not on my birth certificate. And so this has become like instantly almost became one of the most valuable things as far as things go. Like it's just an object. It doesn't do much except for that it brings me a sense of connection. It brings me a piece of joy. It brings me a sense of, yeah, connection is really the right word because it's connected to my father. He made it with his own hands. It's connected to that tree that lived outside of his house, which was his and his wife's house. She's passed on now, and she and I were friends for a while. Um, Dolly was her name. So it's got all of that connection. I can think about like that tree was probably alive about as long as me, give or take 20 or 50 years, as a pine tree outside of their house in Washington State. Um, yeah, to think about all the rain and all the minerals in the soil and the energy that went into that tree and then went into that branch and then went into the breaking of that branch and the drawing of the branch and my father taking that and grinding it down and hand sanding it and then sending it to me. It's just a very neat thing. And I guess the reason I spontaneously picked it up and shared that with you is I think it's a great example of how the process of creativity is much more about the story behind it and much more about the process than it is about the thing that you create. I mean, this is cool and all. And it's neat that it's like a token, a totem of all that story that then I get to set on my desk and pick up in my hands and use to help me recall all of that. And I find that to be a fascinating and beautiful thing. Um, Nonetheless, I'm aware that like one day it will be gone, who knows when. And whenever that is, that doesn't mean that the story itself never happened or wasn't there, right? It's an interesting thing how we tend to uh, make objects signify things or put meaning into things. And I think that's beautiful and neat and tickles me. And you just watch me do that. But I think the danger of that can be that then we get attached to it and we think that the thing, the label or the object is the story, is the experience. And it's really not. It's all temporary. And I mean, for that matter, so is the experience. It's all made up. And that's why I think you should lighten up. Don't take things too seriously. There's my unsolicited advice. Got some in there after all. Um, yeah, thanks for stopping by today and sharing a moment with me. I really just wanted to do that, kind of ramble about creativity. I usually make a little outline with some bullet points, and I didn't do that today, and you can probably tell. And that's part of that editing part, right? But I really did and do want to embrace that unedited creative process more. I have done a lot of that in my life. It's kind of my thing, and I enjoy doing it. And so I hope that I can encourage you to do more of it and give you permission to be imperfect at it by watching me be imperfect. I hope it shows you that, it's not killing me. It's okay. Yes, maybe I look silly. Probably I look silly. Maybe you're laughing at me and that's okay. I don't mind. In fact, kind of makes me smile to think that I might be making you smile. So there's that. Don't forget to leave me a comment, give me a 5-star rating or something like that, whatever seems appropriate. Give me a hey, give me a heads up, give me a thumbs up, give me a comment. Let me know where you're at, what you're thinking. Let me know if you did a little assessment of your creative side. Is that the right side? Let's see, left. So be linear side and your creative side to your right. Let me know if you weighed those just today. It doesn't have to be forever. It doesn't have to be for more than just right now. If you just, you could do it like Gestalt like to say Gestalt like I think I'm 60% creative, 40% logic. There you have my Gestalt reading on that. Um, and when I stop and think about that with my logical side, it's probably fairly accurate in the broader schema of things. Might It definitely leans more to the 80-20 side sometimes, but I would say that I lean more to the 70-30 side other times. So probably 60-40 is a pretty good read of my overall balance, leaning toward the creative, chaotic side. Now, again, it's all relative. If you were a good friend of mine, Autumn, who tends to more toward the organized side, you might label me more at the 70-30 or 80-20 side. So there's nothing wrong with any of that. That's the point. It's all relative. It's all beautiful and great. I'm here to vote for a little more chaos, a little more creativity, tempered with however much editing and logic that you need to feel safe. There you have it. Till next time, stay you, and I'll be seeing you soon. Ciao.